So, just like that, man, we are live. Thanks for jumping on today. I'm excited to dive in. Josh, do you want to kick us off with a little bit of your background and what got you into starting SupraOracles and what your intention was when you started the project?
Sure. So good to be here, Mike. And so I got started in blockchain about 4 or 5 years ago. This is back when I was working in San Francisco, involved in a couple startups. One of them was in food supply chain. One of them was in digital rights management, so like content creators can own their content on the web. And another one I was kind of advising and affiliated with a kind of medical healthcare record privacy organization. This is all before I knew about blockchain, and luckily, it's just like all three of them had blockchain applications. So I drank the Kool-Aid once I heard about Ethereum. It wasn't like a smooth transition. At first, I did think this is a ridiculous way to secure data, and didn't understand like what the problem was. And I didn't realize there was a trust problem in the world, right? So it took some time, but then once I did get the picture, I was lucky enough to be in a position where one of my SaaS products that I put out in the world was actually generating revenue, and from there I was able to basically sustain my kind of education. So I kind of went full time into blockchain, studying as much as I could, learning as much as I could, reading as many papers as I could. Created the kind of Bay Area white paper club. There was about like 15 of us that would get together periodically to kind of do due diligence, and also these papers were really technical. So so it was really great to kind of like hang out with people that are smarter than myself to have them explain it to me like I'm 5. So that was kind of the origin story. Got connected with my co-founder in late 2017 online, and then we met in San Francisco early 2018 during San Francisco Blockchain Week. And at that point, actually a couple months prior to that, I had a high-level idea of maybe we could use randomness and a certain type of network architecture to secure blockchain and scale blockchain. Of course, back then, scaling layer 1 and Ethereum was like the main focus because it just wasn't scaling fast enough. Long story short, was this person had spent some time at Berkeley, right, and also the Bay Area, so was familiar with how expensive it was, and suggested that I consider going to Taiwan to bootstrap here, and I'd never been to Taiwan before that. So I said, okay, sure. I had lived in Asia before, but never to Taiwan. Visited, packed up, did a couple months stint there, and then said, all right, let's go for it. And ended up moving here for going on 3 years.
Wow.
During that period, it's been a ride. We set up a crypto lab here, where we did a lot of R&D into both like studying layer 1 scaling solutions, but also applying blockchain to a variety of different industries. Unfortunately, we entered the market in the coldest bear market possible. So it was very we went from oh, this is really cool, you guys are awesome, to oh wow, and blockchain is a bad word, you shouldn't say that, But we were lucky enough to have perseverance, and we stayed alive by doing consulting work, and also we built up alpha test nets for other projects, or built out the product for them, and we got paid to do that because they raised a lot of money, but they didn't know what to do, and we had accumulated some expertise. And then one of the last stories here that might be relevant is we did a lot of research in randomness before randomness became cool, and also we did a lot of we did a proof of concept for a publicly traded company called Advantech in Taiwan, where we applied IoT meets blockchain for generally mostly for food supply solutions, food supply chain solutions. Then that product and project was also incorporated into a Walmart China kind of a food safety challenge event, and that's kind of where things started to take off again for us. So we've been thinking about securing external data on chain for a while, and it was last November when DeFi was booming, but there's all these smart contract exploits, and a lot of them were the result of Oracle manipulation, that we were hey, we actually have a lot of interesting layer 1 scaling techniques that we could probably fit into the Oracle model. One day, it was literally about a year ago, I stayed up till like 3 in the morning, just kind of sketching things on, a piece of paper. And, then I the next morning I pitched it to the team, and one of our top engineers said, yeah, this seems like it's going to really work. And and that's basically where where we decided to create Supra. Everything just kind of fell into place at that stage.
Yeah, interesting. So what was on that paper? What did you conceive of, or what was that night like? What did you come out with?
Yeah, so I mean, so in general, we were working on a model that is kind of unique. Basically, to a high level, what we do is we organize, what we were experimenting with this, and we had implemented it just to see if it can scale layer one. And we saw that it could, but we're like, okay, well, but another layer one at the time, unless we had something really special, we thought it wasn't the most appropriate thing to do. But we were like, this is still valid tech, but hey, we can actually, like, conveniently, we can port it over to this Oracle, solving the Oracle problem. So basically, just in a nutshell, what it is we organized our nodes into what we call clans, and clans together form a tribe. So it's like a nested architecture. So there's multiple tribes in the total, like, network universe. And we realized that the clan model is like a fundamental unit of compute, that secure computation, basically. This is also very versatile. Like, we can rotate the nodes into new clan formations periodically very easily, and we can rotate clans and dispatch them to different things or play different responsibilities in the network very easily as well. So the idea of dispatching clans to multiple data sources in parallel, that's basically what it was. We're like, okay, so if I needed to look up the price of Bitcoin, in theory, we have these clans in tribe formation. We could randomly sample the tribes, select 5 out of 7 tribes. Of the selected tribes, remember, tribes themselves are composed of clans, and the clans are small committees or groups. We can grab a random clan per 5 out of 7 tribes and send them off to a data source. And then they would run consensus among the nodes within the clan at that data source, and then come together and compare the results and run another round of consensus of the data sources that they had. And that was the beginning of it, and that's basically what was sketched out.
And the problem specifically that it was seeking to solve would be what exactly? How do you articulate that?
Mm-hmm. The Oracle problem. So basically, we go through all this trouble to decentralize the blockchain, right? And then yet so many smart contracts are getting data from oracles or small committees of nodes, like small groups of nodes that are not changing, and they're effectively centralized. Another single point of failure. So basically, this model allows us to, through parallel processing and basically dispatching nodes, these clans in parallel and at random. So a random combination of these nodes are involved for every lookup request. This gets rid of the single points of failure, and while still being very performant. And it turns out the security guarantees are like an order of magnitude greater than the incumbents.
And that's because of the combination of randomness and like centralization within the network,
or not centralization in our network, but let's put it this way: randomness of like which clans, like small committees, are being dispatched, and also the fact that the nodes within that small committee are randomized every, let's just call it 6 hours. So we shuffle the nodes in the clans, and then also during every lookup request, we'll select random clans to be going out to multiple data sources. The key here is it's almost like a double loop consensus among the clans, nodes in the clans, and then among the clans themselves.
Interesting. Okay, got it. And do you consider your specialty to be this level of thinking, this kind of data architecture, as opposed to actually programming out, or do you also get in and just build it yourself?
Yeah, so for me, these days I have been mostly a researcher and system architect. So I've been spending a lot of time with the professors and PhDs and the mathematicians. It's actually kind of funny. We have this internal joke that what we're building is like rocket science, actually. And if you look at the security analysis, it looks like this formalism. It looks like basically like rocket science. So I spend most of my time with that, as well as working with the team our CTO to basically plan out everything. I have to be thinking about. I spend most of my time thinking about optimizations, scaling techniques, and I'm really good at basically looking at the whole picture and tracking the sequence of events that have to be done in the particular order, like down to the minute detail. And then I track that, and I basically work with that and our CTO to create the roadmap. And we have this pretty small but growing team of talented developers that are really implementing it. And then I'm spending a lot of my time looking at what they're building, if they can improve it, as well as the data. So we're always looking at how do we optimize the speed, the performance. We're down to the point where we're trying to squeeze out every last 10 milliseconds that we can to make sure that we're both secure. Extremely security has to be number one, but performance is a very close number two. So I do spend my time mostly in white papers and writing and sketching and planning. But I work very closely every day with our entire developer team.
And when I'm using you, say people who think about layer one infrastructure, is the thought process, how do we optimize the software? How do we optimize the specific order of operations in the software, the calls, the methods, the tactics used to minimize time, to make it as fast as possible? Is that generally, or do you get more into math and thinking about algorithmic ways of figuring this out, or how does the world of software connect with math? And I'm curious your perspective.
Yeah, no, totally. It's really I find it to be really fun. It's good because it's like solving a puzzle, So like Elon Musk always talks about first principles thinking, right? And what you want to do is you do want to kind of think in physics in this type of environment. You want to think about okay, things take a certain amount of time to propagate, like data propagated in the network, right? Knowing that, it takes 133 milliseconds for light to travel around the world, right? And if it takes that is a cap. You can't go faster than that, basically. So we have one fundamental limit. Then we start to look at, okay, how quickly can we get the data to be gossiped to all the relevant nodes, right? And of course, we're trying to build a system where, you want to be robust. So the more nodes, the better in many regards. And then, so you're constantly, you're trying to optimize the networking of the network, like the networking itself. Then, furthermore, the verification of the data. So if this is layer one transactions and it's like a block or a batch of 1,000 or 10,000 transactions, it takes the computer, a lot of time. Well, when I say a lot of time, I'm talking about 700 milliseconds to verify the sending account, the sending account, receiving account, and the cryptographic signature. But if you have to check 10,000 of them, computer can do it, in less than a second. But we're at a stage where we're trying to shave off every 10 milliseconds at this stage, or every 100 milliseconds. So you look at things, and even on the hardware level, right? So one thing that I got to say about Solana and Anatoly, the CEO, is that they have, in the last few years, as I followed them pretty early, that they have really taken a hardware, bare metal kind of look at just scaling blockchain, which almost no one else was doing, and that helped me really think about scaling multi-cores and multi-threading and things like this. Now you have that, but you also want to layer into it the computer science scaling techniques, such as parallel processing and verification sharding and other things like this, where you can get both out of both. You can maximize both the hardware as well as the kind of software techniques. That is how you maximize the performance. And then you always have to check the math to make sure that in a network of 33% Byzantine nodes, will this keep its safety? And then the other is its network liveness, like the ability to stop and stall the network. That's another major consideration we need to have in these things. So every decision we make always has to get run by the mathematicians to check it, and then we also run it through 100 million simulations to make sure that the theory and the math is following these simulations. The outcomes are the same. Then we feel pretty good about that.
Interesting. Let's talk about hardware for a second. So,
Sure.
would you consider Solana's differentiating strategy from early on to be focusing on hardware? And then also, what does it mean to to focus on hardware? Are you housing machines internally? I mean, you clearly don't have racks in your Airbnb. That would be quite a centralized move. People are running these things distributed all over the world, right? So how does hardware actually work? How would people get it, or how is it actually being utilized from people all over the world?
Mm-hmm. So I want to mention that we are still in like this alpha testnet phase, so we're not decentralized enough yet at all. We're just proving everything out that we can scale, and the results are looking good. But then we move into testnet, and then that's where we start to invite. We're already talking with a lot of professional node operators around the world. At that stage, though, we start to decentralize it, and then by mainnet, we need to be sufficiently decentralized. So it's a multi-phase approach. But in terms of hardware, yeah, I mean, once again, there are real physical limits to machines and what they can process and how quickly they can do it. So, like, it really does matter, like, how many cores you have, how much RAM you have, how much storage your machine has. The goal is to build a system that is affordable, but realistically, the ugly truth is any blockchain network is not going to scale on Raspberry Pis. Like, you could do it, that's cool, but the problem is, your network is always going to be as slow as like the slowest one third of the network. So you actually, even the end consumer is going to prefer that everyone has better machines. Now, there's a spectrum here, right? Like Solana's on one side of the spectrum and Raspberry Pi is on the other. And I think something in the middle is what we're targeting, where like the kind of rubric I like to use is, okay, can we use like what's the compute power of a MacBook Pro? Like a modern MacBook Pro is pretty nice machine, That should be sufficient, for you to run a node. That's kind of like where we set it. But the truth is, the better hardware, like on the fundamental layer, better internet connection. Like if everyone has great internet connection and great hardware, that's better for everyone. There's just no way around it, because the end consumer is just going to have a better experience. The
hardware is not Apple consumer hardware, is it? I mean, or are these specialized mining hardware or like more badass hardware manufacturers that are running the majority of the nodes?
So what we're doing is we are not doing specialized hardware. This is a proof of stake network, so we don't have to do a bunch of this like computation for proof of work computations or verifiable delay functions. We do some of this stuff, by the way, but just a little bit, like to join the network to make sure that nodes don't join and leave the network too easily, too freely. You got to kind of incur some costs there. But yeah, I mean, we are trying to make this commodity off the shelf hardware. So, like we are targeting a MacBook Pro like level of hardware. The hardware definitely will be open source. People can build their own racks. We'll encourage people to stack up if you can. I mean, hardware is getting cheaper. Like it or not, the truth is there's a plane back behind me.
Oh, good.
I'll give it a second. I think So basically, hardware is getting cheaper, and you're getting more compute power for bang for the buck, so to speak. There are going to be limits there, but I do think that it is reasonable for a node to run a couple $1,000. I think that's absolutely reasonable, and you have to also consider that if you have a node that actually costs a good amount of money, you probably are also going to take care of it better. Now, I'm not trying to target. I don't want us to do like 10,000, 20,000 machines, dollar machines, which some systems are using certainly. But I do think like commodity off the shelf hardware is suitable, especially for our network.
And when you launch it you mentioned the multiple phases. When it goes onto the Ethereum Mainnet, do you have any idea how many machines would be needed or expected to be running SupraOracles?
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting about SupraOracles is we're our own kind of middleware blockchain. So we are kind of like our own network, and then we also send our data to all the other ecosystems like Ethereum. So we get to service we get to be blockchain agnostic, basically. So that's a really great positioning for us because this allows us to play well with everyone. Anyone that wants more secure data quickly, that's kind of the business we're in here. So the nodes, at like mainnet we're targeting is, I want us to do over 1,000 nodes. Now, getting to that level, it takes time to get node operators, but we do have a very unique kind of value proposition, which is we're going to go to existing networks and say, hey, look, you're operating a node on Ethereum, and ETH, proof of work, but also ETH 2.0. And we're interested to bridge our data services to Ethereum, and we'd like you to participate as a bridge node. A bridge node in our system basically is two distinct nodes with one identity. So you have a machine on Ethereum, and you have a machine on Supra. But your Supra machine is connected to the Supra network and protocol, but you're connected, directly communicating with your Ethereum node. So you trust your own node, right? So you can know, like, your full node has full control, like access into Ethereum, and you can get good data from yourself as long as you're, And then what we do is these super nodes that are bridge nodes that are connected to Ethereum. They're kind of linked to their own node. On our side, they have to run us round of consensus. Hey, did you see the same thing I saw? Did this happen on Ethereum? Then when we qualify that, then we commit it and take the next step forward to pass on the data. This includes things like, there was a smart contract on Ethereum that asked for Supra data, because we want to make sure that, we do have inbound requests that in fact it did happen. So this is kind of our approach, and we'll do that with Ethereum. We'll do that with the emerging ecosystems, starting with the ecosystems that have compatible cryptography that just makes it easier for our network to kind of plug and play. But we do intend to service, the major ecosystems.
Awesome. I don't usually ask this question, but I'm curious because Solana has been rocketing. Did you get a chance to invest in Solana's early token prior to 2018 or 19?
Well, let's see. Back then, I did not get into their ICO. But I did, because I thought it was an interesting project and I liked the team. I just thought it was so different that, I did buy some Solana Sol when it was cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't like, I'm mostly a builder, so I am not really trading much or anything like that. So I just had some just to keep my interest in it. It's like one way to do it. I wish I had 10x more, of course, but But it was I actually like to do that small little bets here and there because it keeps me it reminds me of that because I was like, oh yeah, this is an interesting project, keep up with it, and in that sense, that's
a good point.
I can disclose.
Yeah, it's a good point to invest in projects that you admire. You like the team, you like what they're doing, because it really does contribute to the fuel to the fire. It allows projects to continue to grow and continue to invest in other developers on their protocol or whatever they need cash for. So I was just curious. I interviewed the early investor to Solana with Multicoin Capital. God, am I getting that wrong? No, Chris McCann was an early. He was an early Solana investor. I interviewed him a couple shows ago. We were talking about them in the early days. Apparently, they were about to shut down, and he said that it was right around the 2018 crash, and they were getting all these pullbacks on investors saying they were going to be out of the deal. And they called Chris, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm in, man. Don't worry, I'm going to write the check." And he did, and that worked out all right. So it's good story.
Yeah,
but I learned about it pretty late.
Yeah, that period was very difficult. We've had a couple of close calls where we've had millions of dollars thrown at us as well with really bad terms during that period. And we're like, it's like we're grinding it, like seriously grinding, like not even like month to month, and we have like $5 million dangling here, but it's like for half the tokens. And we're like, I know, can't do that,
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, things bounce back quickly.
A few times. Thank God. But going through that period when you don't know where the end is, you're kind of like walking through it, navigating blindly. It was grueling, especially without like proper funding. So
tell me about it.
that period did make us strong. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I ran a crypto startup called Redeem for 3 years from early 2018 until 2021. We ended up selling the company. But it was like bootstrapped, just figuring it out. We were trying to raise money. We didn't even have that dangle of 5 million. We had like people saying no, thank you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
it worked out. But man, it was the hardest project, the hardest startup I've done in the hardest period of time ever. So, but yeah, gives you some gray
Yeah,
hairs.
totally. Oh, it did, and I agree. Like I've done some startups before. I've been in startup since I was 22. I had my first startup was in poker, online poker related, and I got to sell that to my partner like 6 years later. This period to get to where we're at today was by far, even though I'm way more experienced as a startup founder, most difficult experience so far. By far.
Yeah. Well, good for you, man.
Yeah.
Congrats on making it this far. I want to ask you, what is a meta-game theorist? When you hear those words, what does that mean to you? What is the definition of it?
Yeah, so that's interesting that so that is something I had kind of in my profile for like 6 years before game became huge. So let's put it this way. When I was young, I used to like to make puzzles. I used to like make them for my friends. I used to I love playing games, of course, like Magic the Gathering. And then I got into poker in high school, basically, and I actually ended up forfeiting almost a full ride scholarship to an economics to play online poker professionally back then. And that's where I created my SaaS product. It's not all like roses. It was a really interesting period of my life as well. A lot of kind of wild stories actually. But at that stage, I kind of understood. I got really interested in game theory, and I got interested also in evolutionary psychology. And during this period, I did a lot of reading. I had the luxury of basically after I kind of sold my first startup to my partner at the stage, I had enough to basically take a year off to just study anything new. So I read a lot, experimented with a lot of different things, and game theory was one of them, and also evolutionary psychology was another one. And the idea is like behind a metagame theorist is it's kind of like multi-level thinking, so multiple layers of thinking. So we're talking about in poker you say like, okay, level one is I'm going to react based off of like what you're doing. Level two is I know that you saw me do something, so I know that you're going to react based off of your prior knowledge. Level three is like, I know that I saw what I did before, and therefore I'm going to kind of make my next reaction. And level four is brings it back to level one. It's like, okay, so yeah. So it's like, it's kind of interesting in poker because like there's only so many choices you have ultimately, but it's basically simultaneously like mind games meets the best outcome, trying to find the best outcome. And it's honestly, it's kind of like, for lack of a better word, it's kind of like mind reading. It's not really it's not literal like telepathy or anything like this, but it's kind of like mind games, and it's also, you have to have a lot of awareness of what you have let people do. So for example, sometimes when I play poker, one of the things I used to tell people is like, just don't worry if you bluff early and show it, because you anchor it in people's minds that you're a fish. So you can like anchor these things in people's minds. So now people have a perception of you, then now they think that, okay, this is who you are. And this is like, people really take that first impression deeply.
Yeah.
So they can't let go of it later in the game when you know that they think that you're a fish. So that's where you can like overbet the river and make people make really loose calls. And that's where you get paid off the best. So things like this, these are the types of dynamic that I was really, really interested in back in the day. And to this day, it's like throughout the rest of my life, I'll never perfect it. I'm not actually that good at it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But awareness of it is the first step.
Yes.
And,
yes.
It's yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to even define it as a concept, because it touches many different areas. Like I think it touches, like I do jujitsu a lot, And I think jujitsu is almost the physical manifestation of this concept, where it's like you're making a move, but I opened a pathway for you to make that move, anticipating you would. Therefore, I'm going to counter. But you knew that I opened up that pathway for me to come in there, so you have like a double counter waiting for me. And just like layer 4, you're back to step 1. And I almost feel like it in some ways, it's like if you have 2 master level guys competing on this, or girls on this, it doesn't even matter whether it's jujitsu or poker or whatever the thing is. It almost approaches randomness. Like I almost feel that's what randomness is, when you're operating at a level of metacognition that is beyond your conscious awareness, if that makes sense. That you're almost like you can't be thinking about, well, I know Josh did that, and therefore I'm going to do this. And if you're aware of that, if you're processing that, it's like load on the system. It almost has to be. There's this expression I heard once. Josh Waitzkin is a writer, and I think he does Tai Chi, and he's a master chess player. And he says one line he said that stuck with me. He says, "Before they move, you move first." And it's like you have to just have that intuition or that instinct to kind of intuitively understand what is happening. It's like if so many things are coming at your brain, so much information, you can't process it. I can't be like thinking about it. It has to be just like the gestalt of what is happening is absorbed, and then I just make a move or know what to do. And that's master level shit right there. Yeah.
So that's what basically the state flow is, like being in state. And like once that's why it's so important to do the work, like to practice and do the work and study and like get a fingertip feel, they say, right, for this type of thing, right? And then like what you said about just make a move, or like before they make a move, make your move. I've noticed that also, like almost like at least in the beginning, it doesn't matter what move you make, just get going. Stir the pot a little bit, get some dynamics at play, then feel it out, and then get into flow, and then like just get it going,
Yeah. And I want to ask you about the evolutionary psychology, right? Is that what you're talking about? So, what is that, or how do you understand what the evolution of psychology is?
Once again, I'm not a trained professional. I just read
of course,
things like this. Right. But my interpretation of it is like, how do we evolve to where we're at? So, so we start with like these, single cell organisms, and we get more complex over time, but we're also in a world where we had scarce resources. So there was a lot of like, evolutionary drive for survival. So that, you extend that out a million years later, a couple million years later, we get into kind of, mammals and primates and, scarce resources such as food, and also like the evolutionary drive to reproduce, right? So actually, my understanding, it's really kind of like that's the beginning of it all, like need to survival and need for reproduction. So you have this, and then you have basically we develop the neocortex, the front of the brain, a little bit more, which gives us the ability to do predictive things, like to plan, and which also means that we can foresee events. It gives us imagination, basically, which is a little bit different than most animals, is the ability to imagine something, plan around it, and do something on it. This like additional faculty of the brain is kind of what distinguishes us as humans from everyone else. Now, so evolutionary psychology, in my opinion, is kind of really rooted, once again, in my opinion, really rooted in the drive for survival and reproduction. As the human carcass animal, I think that we have we're a multitude of things, but one of them is definitely the physical layer, like the human, carcass. It's such a weird thing to say.
The meat
right?
suit.
The meat suit, yeah. And that thing has its like, its drivers, neurochemical, emotional, needs food, it needs to, nutrient, etc. And what I think, basically, and also the brain itself, takes up a lot of calories, So what this ultimately means, in my opinion, is the more you can evolve your mind, you know, your chances of increasing survival are greater because you can predict that if that tree is falling, you can hear it, you can see it, you can kind of see its trajectory. I should step away from it so I don't get hit. And actually, most of us that are here today are because we're branched off of a species, or one of our, ancestors avoided that catastrophe more often than not. And then kind of take that to today, where we are actually in a little bit of a different scenario where we might have an overabundance of stimulation and resources and food and stuff like this. It has some very interesting, unique social ramifications because human evolution was like extremely long. It took a long time, but we've developed so quickly in the last, especially in the last 500 years, or a couple thousand years. So what does evolutionary psychology mean to me? It's basically the evolution of the brain, I guess, and consciousness. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe there is a brain and heart connection. I don't think you could just have your head and plant it on a robot and be the same thing. There's definitely a brain and heart energetic connection that's kind of together composed what you might call a soul, or one's essence, and that is it's very interesting. Then you get into okay, so what's the purpose of all this, right?
Yeah, well, I'm curious where you would take that, but I think the purpose of it is that it loops back into the meaning of what we're doing in the world. It very much, if you're not connecting your experience of your life to the outside world, I view that as, that's when we say the spiritual void or the disconnection with meaning and purpose. I think that's kind of the root of the symptoms that we see in society: homelessness, materialistic, consumptionist mindset. I think even a lot of the political angst and depression in the world. We identify these problems, but to trace them all the way back upstream is difficult because it requires kind of this deep thinking about the way that humans are and the history of humans and what we're doing on this rock floating through space, and wrapping that all together in a story. And the story to me is that if you're connected, meaning that you're connected to other people, you're connected to other life in a way that's not just intellectual. I think particularly, I'm so curious to hear your feedback on this, but particularly in the West, I view it as a situation where many people are thinking all the time, so they only have their thoughts to experience. They're disconnected in many ways from other people, from the world, from their heart, their gut, their emotional awareness, tactile senses, and there's just so much contemplation. So these stories kind of run loops. Anxiety is it's like a positive feedback on a system. Where it's vibrating so much because you're thinking about your thoughts that you're thinking about, and then you're thinking, it's just an ongoing strange loop. So I view this is why when you think about it, when you're feeling grounded, we use that word grounded. It's you're not thinking, you're not processing animations in your mind. You're very much located in the present moment, and I think that in a way that's the connection. In some maybe poor way of describing it, but the spiritual connection that seems to be very dismissed in modernity world, that's how it is related to what we're doing, what we're creating, what we're building in the world. At least that's my take on it so far.
Yeah, no, totally. A lot of us in blockchain are constantly in the tech, deep in the weeds, and whether that's technical analysis if you're a trader, or trying to optimize scaling techniques in hardware, another kind of symptom of what's going on here in this game is that we also have I've noticed that a lot of people in blockchain that have made a lot of money they're not happy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I guess I won the game. Now what do I do? I got everything I need to get everything I want. It was too easy. It was so they're like so unfulfilled. To those people, by the way, I recommend a couple things. I think go ahead and start giving away some money and doing things for others. They say volunteering is like one of the best solutions when you're feeling depression and helping others to feel connected again. And also, you're in a privileged position. Like, we can't forget how many billions of people out here in the world are like there's actually people starving in the world. Can you imagine that? Like, why? And it's at this day and age. So there's a lot of major problems to fix. So if you're in a position where you have resources, go ahead and like utilize them for something. Don't just put them into a smart contract to earn yield just because you want to be the richest person in the world. Like, be proactive with it. There's a lot of good that can come out of that. Another, kind of back to what you're saying, it is interesting, like that, you mentioned the human experience, basically, right? Wanting to be connected and actually needing to be connected. I do also think this is strongly an evolutionary thing. I think it's came out of communal, like, survival, tribalism, in order for survival. And I think this extends beyond humans. I think it's in mammals as well. Like when I have a cat now, and she's only like less than a year old, and when I'm gone for like a week or so and I come back, I can feel like she really missed me, and I can feel like like a heart connection to her being. So it's like a real sensation. It's like palpable, So I'm like, okay, so I think this is a very mammalistic thing, like needing to be touched and then needing to be, with those around us. So like we've like evolved like that. Humans fundamentally have to take care of each other. It's like a drive. It's a need. And we need to be also the reciprocation of it. It's like the need to give, but strangely the ability to receive is like it's something that is not like it feels awkward sometimes. Even myself, I'm like, when I'm getting love or getting praise, whatever, it's like, oh, I don't deserve it, or like, oh, shucks, but like learning to say okay and thank you and like accept it. It is kind of part of my Western mind because I'm half American and I lived in the West as well. Some of that is just like it's interesting that I had to like actually like let myself receive, and it's like, it's okay, Josh. Like you're not all that bad boy. You're not like bad dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, very much is.
Yes.
It seems to be very. I used to live in Singapore, and I was only there for less than a year, but I did notice that the lifestyles is different in a way that's sometimes difficult to articulate. I think like it's just strange to. I lived in LA for 5 years. And there's just a huge homeless problem. And the homelessness problem is not really a problem of housing. It's like a problem of people falling out of the fabric of society problem, which is really a connection, emotional connection and networking problem. I think good and bad housing policies contribute to that or accelerate it. It's not the only thing, but it certainly is a main thing. And I just view it differently in Singapore. Like there's rules, and this may be true in Taiwan, being that it's a similar kind of place, where there's like all your family is within 30 minutes. It's like your grandparents, your cousins, everyone is very, very close. And that dynamic kind of loops people together. And who knows, maybe that's what we're kind of unconsciously or subconsciously building with technology, is this metaverse where it really is the culmination, like the butterfly coming out of the cocoon is like we're living the most connected life, even though we have to go through these two-dimensional glass portals to get there. I'm sure there will be problems in that new world, because if there's not, then we'll be bored, and if we're bored, then we're just going to destroy the game and make new problems to solve. But that's kind of my view on it. It has to be mysterious. If we knew the way it would go, then we wouldn't want to play.
That's true. I mean, we are problem solving seeking creatures. We love to figure things out. What you're saying, like this whole NFT phenomenon, right? It's testament to that, like to want to be part of something bigger than yourself. And blockchain as a movement, Web3 as a movement is it's kind of similar. Like I actually spent an absurd amount of time alone, in trying to get into a lot of work to do, but also I don't feel disconnected because I'm talking to you right now. I have a bunch of teammates around the world that I can speak to almost any time of the day. I got Twitter, so I feel like I'm actually everyone's close. The world actually feels incredibly small. The world these days is like, wow, the Earth is so tiny now.
Yeah,
we really do have to take care of this thing.
Yeah, totally.
So,
totally.
Yeah.
Do you view SupraOracles as having, and maybe we touched on this, but if it's worth elaborating, a mission that incorporates or encompasses, integrates maybe with these ideas that if you guys are wildly successful over the next 8 to 15 years, somewhere in the long horizon, this does what for humanity? How do you think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, the whole point of getting to blockchain in general, right, is it should make humanity ultra efficient. Things should be way more transparent, a lot less corruption, and a lot more efficient. So human coordination, a lot of the, unnecessary things that don't have to really be there can be weeded out. This is just good all around for everything. Ultimately, I mean, we're talking about from making sure that food supply chains are optimized to that knowledge workers and creators can use their information in their minds and their artistic ability to be able to earn a living. To just fair democracies in the world. These are, I know, difficult questions. Difficult things to solve. But and I'm not saying blockchain solves everything, but I do think blockchain touches almost everything soon enough, eventually. I think what we do is we take it very seriously to secure data, to bring external data on chain. That is our number one focus. Now, we just so happen to have a solution that is ultra secure while also being very fast. But still, for example, we had surveyed around 200 DeFi founders and investors, asking them a variety of questions such as, do you prefer, in your preference, is security more important than speed, or speed more important than security and data correctness? And it's very clear that data correctness is number one, because smart contracts are composable, they may interact with each other. It's not like the traditional, financial markets where if there is a mess up, they can roll it back. You can't do that on blockchain. So data correctness always has to be number one. So does getting correct, accurate data on chain help and matter? Yeah, I think it does. It can help facilitate new use cases that are just not really possible with a smart contract layer that does not communicate with the outside world or other chains. So the service that we do provide and hope to bring to the Web3 ecosystem is basically a trustable data layer, the Oracle layer that, Supra means above. You got a blockchain layer, but the layer above that is actually the Oracle layer that communicates with the outside world or other chains and stuff like this. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to secure that layer because it's just not been enough credible competition in that space. And, I think that space is maturing, but we're just bringing a different approach to doing this. And it just happens to be really secure compared to what's out there.
I love it. If where are you guys now in terms of either funding or any terms of internal employees, or however you measure some outward metrics of progress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So funding's going quite well. I can't talk about the numbers too specifically, but basically, we're oversubscribed by a lot. And
you're raising from institutional investors or more the ICO token route?
So in our earliest rounds, it's primarily, it's actually a nice mix of both quite famous crypto VCs as well as some non-crypto VCs. Very well connected. Pretty much at this stage, once we close that and it's done, is we're like a hop skipping away from pretty much anyone in the world, from financial tycoons to Hollywood superstars, So we got a good kind of repertoire of supporters. We're currently kind of preparing and starting to prepare for our strategic round, which is mostly focused on node operators, and personalities like yourself and other KOLs, key opinion leaders, and influencers. And then basically this is a smaller round that's in preparation for a public sale. The public sale, we're working closely with the Republic.co family. They've been great to help us kind of like get things prepared for that type of offering. What we like about that is we can get Americans and non-accredited investors involved, and we can distribute the token fairly and try to do kind of a fair launch in that regard. Instead of we've been very good about limiting too much token supply to any given party. In fact, it's very, very well distributed, and we think this is just going to ultimately create a fair system for everyone in the long run.
Awesome, man. And how many people now regularly contribute to the project, approximately?
Mm-hmm. So we have well, this is kind of a lot actually. So we have our core team, but we also have some people that we're working with that are working on toolings that is going to help our network. And then we also work with the folks at like Republic, and then we also have advisors, and this includes some university professors that are like mathematicians and computer scientists, as well as actual like cryptographers. And some of them are part of the team, some of them are joining the team, and some of them are just advisors. So the numbers at this stage in aggregate is probably like 38.
Cool. That's awesome. That's a fun size. Mm-hmm. That's big enough where you feel a real community. Yeah,
we definitely know everyone, but I want to kind of keep it. I'm not trying to expand too quickly, too fast. But at the same time, once the core protocol is out there and in the wild, then we can talk about like going a little bit more aggressive into team growth and such. But at the moment, it's I do like to work with small knit groups and small teams on very specific things.
Awesome, man. Well, congrats again, Josh, on all the progress. I love the product that you guys are working on, and I got introduced to you through the Republic community. So hats off to them for helping you guys and all the work they do. And are you active? You mentioned Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
Mm-hmm. It's at Joshua Tobkin, Tobby as in boy, Kin as in Nancy. It's just my first name, last name. So at Joshua Tobkin. I'm not like the best at Twitter, but I do enjoy it. It's fun. There's so much like alpha on Twitter, like so much great minds that are willing to share information. So I get to like ask really complex questions with all kinds of founders from around in the Twitter world, and I get responses. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. All right, buddy. Well, I hope to have you back on someday. Thanks for sharing your time and your story today.
Yeah, Mike. Thanks a lot. Thanks for this opportunity. It's great chatting with you.
Cheers, man. Cheers, man.